This week's health focus is on stress, how stress affects our health, how it affects our weight management, what we can do to reduce it, and just a few more insights into stress. So first, we'll just talk about what stress is. We kind of all have an idea of this, I'm sure. You know that stressful events happen, it affects your body, maybe gives you anxiety or makes you feel a certain type of way. We all know this general feeling of stress. What a lot of people don't realize is that stress is necessary. It's just part of the way our bodies have evolved, and we need it. It helps us to produce certain hormones and neurochemicals. So that's one thing I wanted to get out of the way, is just so we know that stress is not bad. There's just certain amounts of stress that we need, certain amount of stress that we don't want, and we also don't want chronic stress. We don't want stress every day for a long period of time. Another thing that might get misconstrued is what type of stress affects us. So some people, there are terms like good stress and bad stress, or distress and eustress. And while there's some meaning behind that stuff, what is happening in our bodies doesn't really matter what type of stress we are receiving. So if you're doing a workout, that stresses your body, and your body has a stress response. If an earthquake happens, that stresses your body, and the same stress response happens. We release adrenaline or epinephrine, a bunch of hormones are released, and neurochemicals are changed, we have our flight or fight response, and then we react. And our reaction is actually going to be the biggest thing that we're going to focus on today, how that can improve our long-term health. So how the stress affects our body is basically, as soon as a stressor hits, we release epinephrine or adrenaline. Your vision, you can see better, you can react quicker. That's why you'll see maybe athletes trying to get themselves pumped up. It actually helps them perform in their sport. So in that sense, stress is good, but we don't want to be constantly pumping out adrenaline and epinephrine. We need to learn how to activate what's called our parasympathetic nervous system, which is just the opposite of the sympathetic, and that just helps to relax us. So one thing that we'll focus on today that is really important in terms of our overall health and our weight maintenance is cortisol. Cortisol is an important hormone in our body, and we actually need it every day to function properly. So we don't want to get rid of cortisol. We don't want to demonize it. We're just going to teach you some things that you can regulate it a little bit better, because we don't want to always have high cortisol levels. The reason we don't want high cortisol levels is because it inhibits muscle growth, so it'll stop you from making new muscle. It makes you store fat, particularly belly fat. So if you think about it evolutionarily, it makes sense that cortisol does this, because when we're in a stressful situation, our body doesn't really need to be focused on building muscle. It doesn't really need to be thinking about long-term memory. It doesn't really need to be thinking about anything else. And it also makes us gain weight, because it's our body's thinking, okay, we might need to store energy for right now. Maybe we won't have any for a long time. So let's hold on to what we have. And obviously in today's world, we really don't need that. We can always get food. There's not too many emergency situations like that. So these are all reasons that we need to control our stress, or learn how to properly react to stress and use our stress to our advantage. So how do we reduce stress? So first one I'm going to talk about is exercise. Hopefully that's one that everybody's already doing, but I'll kind of explain how that helps and why we do it. So I already mentioned in the beginning of the video, exercise actually causes your body stress, and we have a stress response from it. Probably have a release of adrenaline, our sympathetic nervous system activates, and we feel really amped up. So you might be thinking, okay, then maybe we shouldn't exercise because that's putting stress on our bodies. Well, that's not really the case. For one, there's tons of other benefits from exercise that really offset this stress load. And two, this is actually basically a practice for stress. So you can use exercise as a way to cope with stress in other situations. So for example, let's say you are doing a high intensity cardio session. We have intervals, 1 minute of really intense exercise, then you get a little rest. So in those high intensity moments, if you can focus on something like your breathing or just your thoughts in general, and not let yourself wander or disassociate, then that's actually making you more resilient to stress. So if something bad does happen, let's say like an earthquake or a natural disaster, you're more likely to respond well to that and handle yourself better. And even in smaller situations, you don't have to be so extreme as earthquakes. Even something like anxiety or daily anxiety, learning how to be resilient in your exercise routine and managing that stress is going to make you more resilient in your everyday life. So even for small stressors, maybe something like driving through traffic, you're going to be more resistant to that stress. And another reason why we still want to exercise, even though it does cause us stress, is the long-term management. So long-term, the benefits of exercise way outweigh those small stressful effects of the workout. Next, we'll talk about diet and how diet can affect stress. So short-term versus long-term of dieting is very similar to smoking. So if you are a smoker, if you know somebody that's smoking, or that is a smoker, you've probably heard, it relieves stress when they smoke. And that is true. And diet does the same thing. So if you're someone that stress eats, you have these cravings for junk food. And if you eat the junk food, that actually will help to mitigate your stress in the short term. But the problem is the long term. So if you're always coping with stress through eating or through junk food specifically, the negative impact of that food is going to far outweigh the positive impact. So in the short term, you'll release dopamine and some neurochemicals that help you relax. But long term, you're just increasing cortisol levels, you're reducing your ability to regulate blood sugar, and you're increasing your blood pressure. Those are all things that are going to make stress worse for you. So just like exercise, if you can resist the temptation to eat junk foods in the short-term stressful situations, that's going to make you more resilient. Basically, it's a little workout for your mind saying that, okay, I don't need this junk food. I can get by through this stressful situation without that. And I'm going to get into a few more things about what can help you in these short-term situations. Because sometimes it can be hard if you're really stressed to go force yourself to work out. That will help, but you still have to put in the work of, 30 minutes to an hour of doing that work to reduce the stress. So sometimes you need something a little bit quicker. And especially if you're worried about something like indulging in some bad food or bad habits that you don't want to do. Another important one that may get overlooked or you just might not think about is social connection and meaningful social connection. So just going to a grocery store is not necessarily going to give you this, but seeing people that you care about, your family and friends, or even having a good, genuine interaction with a random person, getting a compliment from them or giving compliments to them, that actually releases serotonin, helps to calm you down and reduce stress. Everybody has probably heard, being in isolation, or let's say a prisoner in solitary confinement, these are some of the worst punishments. And that basically is a huge stress and places you under constant stress for being in isolation. So a lot of people have probably seen during this pandemic, a lot of people have suffered through mental illness and anxiety and depression. And a lot of that is brought on by the lack of social connection. So if you are somebody that's experienced a lot of stress, that is something to consider as well. Maybe look at your lifestyle the last few weeks, see if you've been getting some social connection, see if you can get some more social connection. The last thing I'll talk about, and really this is the most important when it comes to managing stress, is your breath and your breathing. So a lot of people hear this and they probably roll their eyes and they think about meditation and things that they really don't care to do. But in reality, our breath is just a natural part of our body, and it's really important to our stress. So something I talked about in a previous video with sleeping was the physiological sigh. So this is a really good tool that you can use in everyday situations, in stressful situations, to help bring alertness back to you, bring calmness back to your mind when you're experiencing something stress. So as a reminder, the physiological sigh is a deep inhale, preferably through the nose if you can. And then right after you finish that inhale, don't exhale, you just inhale again really short. So, and then we exhale through the mouth. So it's a big deep breath in, short breath in, and exhale. And you can do that 2 or 3 times. And then it takes a minute or two to calm you down, but it will help calm you down a little bit. It'll lower your heart rate and helps you to focus and be more calm. So that's a real life, situational thing that you can use to instantaneously calm you down. Now, if you're in an extremely stressful situation, it might not be enough, and maybe you don't even want to be calm in that scenario, but this is something you can do when it's those daily stressors like traffic or just things hit you hard. Another thing that has been really helpful for me, especially managing chronic stress or long-term stress, is meditation. So a lot of people I know are very resistant to meditation. They don't feel like they can sit in quiet and focus for 10 to 15 minutes. But the key to it is really the exposure over long periods of time. So if you're super stressed and you try to sit down and meditate for 10 minutes, it's probably not going to do that much for you right then and there. It might even make you more stressed because you're worried that you're not doing it right, or you're worried that you hear your heart beating, or you feel yourself breathing really hard. It's really about the buildup of the long term. So doing it over, every day for 2 weeks is going to greatly reduce your overall stress levels and help you manage stress better going forward. So some of the things that I recommend, there's an app called Headspace. I really like that. That one you do have to pay for, but you can use it for free for 10 days, I believe, or for their Take 10 program. Another one is Calm app. That's another paid one. If you don't want to pay for one, that's fine, of course. There's one called Insight Timer, INSIGHT Timer. And that one's free, and it gives you a whole bunch of meditations that you can follow. Start off slow with them, sit in silence, focus on your breathing, listen to the prompts. That'll go a long way to help. Another thing with the breath and related to exercise, in our workouts, I always include a cool down. I know it's really tempting to skip the cool down because it seems pointless, but this is actually very important when it relates to stress. So the sympathetic nervous system is your stress response. When you exercise, you're activating your sympathetic nervous system. You're increasing stress. So you need to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the stress relieving system. You need to activate that after exercise to get rid of any deleterious effects of exercise. So one of the big ones that I've been adding into your workouts is 7-Eleven breathing. And even the cool down flow that I have, you're supposed to be breathing in 3 times, 3 deep breaths each exercise. There's a reason for all of this. This is going to help activate that parasympathetic nervous system, especially the 7-Eleven breathing. So the 7-Eleven breathing, if you haven't done that or if you are unfamiliar with it, it's 7 seconds of breathing in followed by 11 seconds of breathing out. Now, I know this is really hard, especially after a workout. The 7 seconds and 11 seconds is not really that important. What is important is that you're exhaling longer than you're inhaling. So if you can only inhale for 4 seconds, but you can exhale for 7 seconds, that's good. You just want to make sure that you're exhaling longer than your inhale. And basically what this does is it sends a message between your heart and your brain, telling your body that it is time to relax. And it's sending out signals that we can release, get rid of the adrenaline, we can release norepinephrine, calm ourselves down, and start to recover. So if you don't do your cool downs after workouts, you're just increasing your stress without getting the benefits of the stress relieving properties of working out. So make sure you do those cool downs. One more thing with the breath as it relates to exercise. When you are stretching, it's really important that you're breathing through the stretches. If you are holding stretches and holding your breath at the same time, you're increasing stress. Your adrenaline is going to be spiking, and it's not going to make it comfortable. It's not going to make the changes you want. So breathe through it, deep breaths, deep inhales, deep exhales, relax your muscles into it. So just a quick recap of today's video. Stress is not bad. Stress is important for our daily lives. We just want to learn how to manage it and how to reduce its negative impacts on our body. Breathing is number one important thing. You can try out meditation, you can do 7-Eleven breathing, you can do the physiological sigh. Long-term management of stress, exercise, diet, eating healthy foods, not giving in to the temptations of coping with junk food, and social connection. That's it for stress. Hope these tips can provide some stress relief for you.